So we are just outside of Savannah, Georgia at the mighty 8th Air Force Museum, and we're going to get an up close and personal look at a true master of the air, the B-17. Now, outside of being called the Flying Fortress and literally having 13 50 caliber machine guns mounted all over it, there isn't a whole lot that I know about this aircraft, but that's going to change today. We're going to link up with Greg, who is in charge of the restoration efforts here, and we're going to get an up close and personal look at a B-17 and hopefully gain a little bit more insight into the air war during World War II. So what you're looking at here is a PT-17 Cadet. Now this was used by the Army and Navy as a trainer, and Boeing produced thousands of these. And I just wanted to give you a visual. So think about what a plane would have looked like in World War I. Probably would have looked pretty similar to this. So imagine going from this to this, the P-51 Mustang, in really 20, 25 years. So you can kind of see the evolution of aircraft here and the B-17 here. So we're looking at the city of Savannah. Well, the city of Savannah was actually on a handful of B-17s in World War II. So the original city of Savannah was on its way to England where it had engine trouble, and it would land in, I believe, Iceland or Greenland. And from there, that crew would hop on another B-17, and they would carry that name, City of Savannah, with it, and they would begin flying missions once they got to England. I believe this crew was shot down on their 13th or maybe 15th mission over enemy territory, and I believe their tail gunner was killed, and the rest of the crew became POWs. Now, this specific plane was produced in late 1944, and it was never flown in combat. But after World War II ended, it saw a handful of activities like carrying cargo, conducted firefighter operations, and it even saw some time in Canada. And 15 years ago, this craft was obtained from the Smithsonian, and it has been restored to bear the name City of Savannah. So if you were a little confused about the name, hopefully that offers some clarification.
The National Museum of the Mighty Eights is here in Pooler, Georgia, just off I-95 outside of Savannah. The Mighty Eights started right here in Savannah. They stood it up in the what is now the American Legion down at 1108 Bull Street, which is right by Forsyth Park here in Savannah. So this was the home where the Mighty Eighth originated. So it's applicable or that the museum wound up in this neighborhood. So we're in front of our B-17G, and had a 10-man crew, and if you can read the print up there, it said the average crew weight was 1,200 pounds. I don't think it would make it with my crew on there right now, so I'm not sure we'd make that grade. They flew, the Mighty Eighth lost 26,000 men in World War II. I mean, there's the number's just astronomical, which is why on Memorial Day weekend here out in our gardens, we put up 26,000 48-star flags, so people understand what that number is. It's not just a number. Each one of those guys had a mom and dad, family, a dozen plus members of one family were all impacted by their loss, and future generations, who didn't have their sons, who didn't have families. So I mean, you can kind of see how that rolls out. B-17 Wise, again, she's a 4-engine, had a chin turret, top turret, cheek guns up here. Middle is protected by the ball turret and waist gunners, and then a tail turret gunner as well. So all 50 cals. A max load for us was 12 500-pound bombs. For the most part, they didn't haul that many. It was just too hard to get off the ground. or to fly very far. So it was not uncommon to have a 6 bomb load. But then if you're taking 60 bombers with 6 bomb loads, you're getting the same net effect. It just was more efficient for them. We think the B-17 is beautiful. So it's, I mean, the wingspan, the engineering behind it just amazes us every day. It was built to be disposable. They literally did not expect them to come back from their missions. But 80 years later, we're still working on her. And every time I drill out a few rivets on a panel, the other ones pop because it was built so flawlessly or so perfectly by Rosie and everybody that was behind that part of it.
Now, if you're curious as to why the B-17 was dubbed the Flying Fortress, well, here's some of the armaments here. Here is the nose gunner here, and you have 4 .50 caliber machine guns just on the nose here. And just bear with me here as we work our way around. You can see just the sheer size of this plane up close. You have another .50 caliber machine gun in the midsection here, along with another one on the other side. And right here you have twin .50 caliber machine guns in the ball turret here, which is probably one of the more dangerous positions on the plane. Imagine being thousands of feet in the air and you're suspended in this turret here, and there's nothing below you but air. And last but not least, here is the tail section here. Wow. So yeah, if you were curious as to why these were called the Flying Fortresses, they were literally machine gun nests in midair. Impressive to see in person. Now here's just another example of the armaments here. You have a gunner holding a .50 caliber machine gun, and just look at the sheer size of the .50 caliber machine gun here. You can see loading them up in the plane to be mounted, and you can see here some of the gunners in action. Now, although the plane is pretty big, you can still see the quarters are pretty cramped. So here's 2 gunners in action here. Just another example of the armaments of the Flying Fortress.
So you can see that, again, he was basically on his backside for the majority of the time that he was in the ball, which was from the time they crossed the English Channel until they were homeward bound across the English Channel. To put him in there, they would go guns down, and the hatch would open up into the waist, and the waist gunners would help drop him down in there. Some of them left their boots on. A lot of them found that too cumbersome, that their feet would go numb, so they would go without the boots. The average height of the bomber was about 5'6" for the most part. Again, the ammo cans, the sight, all that fills up that ball pretty fast. So the smaller in stature you were, the easier that was.
Wow.
So you can see the foot stirrups up in there. Again, with this hatch opened up inside, he would have dropped down in and put his feet right into those stirrups, and then you slowly get your backside into the seat, and then you're back up against here, and then they roll your head forward, and your head rests against here as they close that hatch on you. And then you disengage the ball from the gearing system, and then he has complete control for azimuth and elevations.
Wow.
Had a suit heater, but again, you're 220 knots at 40 below zero. Not a fun place. You'll see in the movie they holler at them about, having their parachute with them or having their flak jacket on. After a couple missions, a lot of them weren't always complying with the rules because it was so tight. You just had to pick and choose what was important. I flew on aluminum overcast several years ago, and I was going to take some pictures after the flight of a few things we were working on. So I said, hey, I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes. And he said, okay, lock it up when you're done. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you got a key, right? And I said, yeah, I got a key. To ours. He said, same key opened every B-17 ever made.
Really?
It's like, so I did not know that. So. Head on in.
Oh boy.
We'll let you get video on my butt.
Here we go. Wow. And I've already hit my head. I'm not even in it yet. Wow. So despite its size on the outside, on the inside, it's pretty cramped.
Yeah, and this is the most spacious area.
Yeah.
There would have been an APU sitting right here, which is an external power unit, and it's rather bulky. So again, when they got to England, most of them didn't fly with an APU because they didn't land anywhere where they were going to need an APU. So that's gone out of here, and that took up a huge portion of space. We'd mentioned suit heaters before. That's a good isolated what a suit heater would look like, and his whole suit, he would have jacked into that and control the heat a little bit. It was very, very limited. All your control cables for the control surfaces, all operational, and that'll let you shoot the waist guns, 50 caliber.
So this section's called the waist?
Yep.
Wow.
And the early models had the windows were exact opposite of each other.
Okay.
But they, if they were both chasing targets, they'd run into each other. So the newer models staggered them this way.
Wow.
Which,
and this is your sight here, it looks like?
It's called compensator, and it is basically, it was an early computer system.
Wow.
So it's a lot of different companies. Back then, all companies in America kind of combined their talents and skills. So there's everything from there from Polaroid to some of the sunglass companies to you name it. They all put together. The farm boys and that didn't really care for the compensators because it would take the airspace of the aircraft and all that into a calculation which would help them lead the airplane. Most of the farm boys knew how to lead an animal when they were shooting, so it was frustrating for them to have computer assist.
Interesting.
Every unit or every position up here you'll see will have oxygen. Again, it's a non-pressurized airplane. Flying missions at 18 to 22,000 for the most part, where it's 30 to 40 below zero. So that everybody was on oxygen. They also had intercoms where they could talk to each other. Traditionally, the pilot was flying, and the right seater or the co-pilot would have been mission commander, or not commander, but he would be the crew would be his responsibility. So he would conduct the comm checks, or if they needed something, he was usually the one they talked to. And he also, when we get to the cockpit, you'll see his gauges were he monitored engine temps and RPMs and had a lot of the technical controls while the pilot was navigating or flying.
All right, so we're making our way back to the tail gunner section here. And so right back there, this is where the tail gunner sat. And he had twin 50 caliber machine guns. And if this guy got taken out, there was essentially no defense on the back portion of this aircraft here, which is kind of a vulnerable spot. So this was a very, very important position here.
You'll see in the miniseries as well, or hopefully they will. We recorded some of the audio for it, but they had bailout bells, and they would ring it. There was a different sequence of events, one for prepare to bail out, and then one for bailout. But as loud as the airplane was, or with live fire, I'm not sure how they even heard it, but but there was that form of technology. You'll see a lot of the electrical stuff. That's a plastic case. Because of the technology back then, you'll see a lot of these porcelain conductors and porcelain standoffs. Over here, there was some destruct capability to destroy before abandoning ship. The Norden bomb site had it. Some of the IFF systems had it.
So we're getting ready to kind of pass over the ball turret here. Slowly make my way. It's always a little tougher with the camera. So just giving you a little perspective as to where we started. We entered that door right here, made our way past the 250s here. Here's your ball turret, and now it looks like we're entering communications or radio room?
Radio room.
All right.
So there's a single radioman, and he handled the communications. And if you can see that rack behind you there, had different tuners.
Oh wow.
So whenever he wanted a different frequency, you didn't change channels, you changed tuners.
Interesting.
So
pretty high tech for the time, I'm assuming.
and then above that you'll see a series of handles. But if you watch Memphis Belle or any of them where they had to crank the gear down, those were the type of handles that they put on the main landing gear in Memphis Belle.
Interesting.
So electrically, you saw our exterior lights are on. The landing lights are on, which are the headlights inside in the wings. Even a passing light in the left wing, which was common. We have identification lights on the belly, so they could tell from the ground if it was, today's lights were part of their briefing. And then we flew with those lights on, and if somebody asked me to change it, they had the capability in the cockpit of changing which lights it was, so they could say, okay, he is one of ours, he is one of us. Other than that, I'd say the fire extinguisher got a little dark to see probably, but the original doors and the technology was very respectable. A lot of what we do today isn't much different than what they did back then, which
wow,
seems impossible. I can let you lead through there for visibility wise.
Okay.
Bombay, what we've done was we went with a 12 bomb load, and with the 12 bomb load, which was I won't say uncommon, but the B-17s, they flew so many on a mission, you didn't have to have everybody back in a full load. So every bomb from every bomber is what made the mission the success. So you can see there's 6 on the left, and then we don't have any on the right. We're still working on some of the mechanisms and eventually the wiring and the solenoids that was electrically released by the Bombardier.
Okay.
And we think we'll leave the right side open so people can see that side of the technology.
Probably a pretty interesting experience walking across this little catwalk with these doors open, airborne, huh?
It's actually a little bit skinnier than that. It's got about a 1-inch lip on each side, and it's about 4.5 inches wide. So yeah, if you're getting bumped around, and we put a bar in there, but it was a rope. So for them to walk through there, which is sometimes they'd have to try to kick the door to get them to open. Fly an entire 10-hour mission and not drop your bombs. Do whatever it took.
All right, here we go. Wow.
Control bomb load. See the spinners on a couple of them. We don't have spinners on all of them yet.
Wow. Again, they utilized every square inch of this airplane, huh?
Yep.
Wow. There's would be the ground. Lots of clouds. Oh boy. It's getting narrow. That was hit number 2. And I'm snagged here. There we go. Luckily Greg has my 6. Now I'm going to turn real quick so you can see the nose of the bombs here. Now obviously, do they impact... do they explode on impact with the ground, or do they air burst, or was it a combo?
They had the technology to do either or. They also had the spinners on them, so it wouldn't activate. So early on, they were hitting other airplanes or exploding too close to the airplane. So they put spinners on them. They could program.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, it's pretty tight. So turning back this way.
It's going to put you right in the top there. Feel free to stand on it.
Oh yeah, look at that. So we're obviously entering the cockpit here. Now I'm going to turn real quick and show you one of the turrets here. As you can see.
You can step up in that pedestal.
Wow. Alright, so we're in one of the top turrets here. And you can see there's not much space. I got 50 caliber on each shoulder here. Gotta spin the camera around, excuse the shakiness. And there's your tail. So this thing would rotate all around, and your cockpit is right here. Well, this is a new experience as well. I'm on top of the B-17. Greg has been absolutely amazing. He's pretty much letting me do whatever I want, but here is that top turret that we were just in. You can see the cramped quarters here, perhaps a better view. And you have the P-51 and a German fighter in a dogfight as we're trying to go over our target here. And here is the front. Just incredible. Yeah, this is pretty cool. Came here just on a whim, and now I'm on top of a B-17 in the middle of the museum, and everyone's looking at me, wondering who I am, which no one important, but this is cool. On top of living and breathing history. Never thought I would be in the cockpit of a real B-17 here.
She's quite the lady.
Yeah, I'd say this is incredible.
Like saying that if you're looking at the gauges, actually, well, back here you got O2 bottles on both sides, which
okay.
Obviously were explosive if it came to that. But hydraulic pumps are over here. A little bit of everything. Good flare pistol. Different colors of flares meant different things upon arrival. There's a whole lot going on in the cockpit as a general rule here. And looking at your control panel up there, you'll see again the pilot's gauges are more, pilot navigation and airspeeds, etc. And the more mechanical side would have been the co-pilot.
Okay.
So he's watching your engine temps, controlling your fire extinguishers.
Wow. Now, as far as communication, I mean, what's the noise level like up here with these?
It's extremely loud.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different, particularly with the weapon systems on, they have everything from Appledyne engines to motors. Down there in front of your knee was the autopilot system, and you'll see that, I would assume, in the Masters of the Air as well as Memphis Belt.
Wow.
Where they could put it on the autopilot with using this system, and then you'll see the very similar item where the navigator bombardier has up front.
So just wanted to show you another view of the cockpit here, and just how truly cramped this plane was, and just how much technology was crammed into this thing. Remember, we're in, this probably developed in the late 30s, and it's 1940s now, and look at all the technology here behind me. I mean, it is just cramped. It may seem archaic today, but back then this was cutting edge. You have your 50 cal ammo being fed up into here.
Just the two guys were up here. The navigator would have been
just incredible. All right, so I moved, so let's reorient ourselves. We were just up into that ladder, into the cockpit. So I climbed down, crawled through this little area here, and now we are in the nose of the plane. And this is where you obviously have a couple more 50 caliber machine guns here. And this crew member sat up here. And if you don't know what this is, this was probably the most cutting edge technology in World War II. This is your Norton bomb sight. They'd use a combination of things: your altitude, your airspeed, the weather at the time, and it would factor where you would drop your bombs and hit your target. Now, this was highly sought after. Anytime one of these crews was shot down, this wasn't destroyed on impact. The crew would do what they can to destroy this, and oftentimes the crews would either be interrogated or tortured because the Japanese and the Germans alike wanted to know the Norton bomb sight and what made it so special. This is very surreal to be up in this portion of the aircraft here. Now again, just to give you some perspective, this is probably the most room I've had since being in here, but it's still kind of cramped. Again, you have your twin 50s on each side and your Norton bomb sight here. So we worked our way back outside, and I wanted to give you another view of where the bombs were located. So you can see right here, that is the catwalk we walked through. It was a little hard to see, but I wanted to give you this angle. Look how these bombs are just packed in here. And I believe these are 500-pound bombs. So another example here. And where we just saw the Norton bomb site was up in here. So just to give you some orientation as to where we are. So we were up there in the nose of the plane, and just below the nose you had another turret. So again, this is the Flying Fortress. I believe it had 13 50 caliber machine guns. Now, being so close to the plane, you can physically touch it. This is just really thin aluminum. And think about German flak exploding next to the plane. Think about German fighters riddling this thing with their bullets. It goes right through this. This is super light metal. So that's something to remember, that these crews had essentially no protection. I mean, again, you can just hear how thin it is. And it had to be because the lighter the aircraft, the more fuel, the more bombs it can carry, and the faster it is. So it can't be weighed down with all this armor. Now this is what your typical airman would wear while flying missions over Germany or any other enemy occupied territory, but I'm trying to get rid of some of the glare here. But what you're seeing is, you're probably wondering why he's all bundled up. Well, these bombers here, they flew so high that the temperature could be negative 40 degrees. So these bombers and their crews were all bundled up. And that's, again, another part of this war that you don't really think about. You know, at first glance you think maybe this offers some sort of protection from German flak or any other anti-aircraft fire or fighters, but nope. This is to keep the airman warm, and you can see his Mae West there, or life vest, and his, I'm assuming, his bailout chute. But this is the standard garb of a pilot or crew member of a B-17.
John Luckadoo, Lucky Luckadoo, tells a story of there being a attack, blew out the front plexi of the nose, air coming in, froze his feet, postponed his completion of 25 missions. And by the way, 25 missions was the standard to rotate off flying status until the spring of 1944, then it was raised to 30 missions, and then 35 missions in the summer of 1944. Lucky Luckadoo, friend of the museum, incredibly articulate guy. He said he was in a flight class of 40 students. He enlisted when he was 18, volunteered when he was 18, was a co-pilot by 20. Of his class of 40, he was one of 4 who completed 25 missions. This is back prior to the deployment of the P-51 Mustang, in the spring of '44. So he considers himself lucky to have even survived. He flew his 25 missions with the 100th Bomb Group, called the Bloody 100th because of the losses they sustained. All these units sustained incredible losses, where you would be in a squadron of 12 and none could come back. 11 or 1 would come back, and so those losses were pretty substantial, especially during 1943. In 1943 was when there was enough critical mass of bombers in the 8th Air Force for large-scale missions, 200, 300 bombers, missions like the first Schweinfurt mission in August of 1943. 300 bombers went out, approximately 300 bombers went out, 60 were shot down. Go back to Schweinfurt in October, send another 300 bombers, another 60 get shot down. And so when 60 bombers got shot down, 600 men are lost. And so that is tremendous losses. October 1943, there's a week there they call Black Thursday, and day after day, they got in these planes, these young men, and did what they thought they needed to do to fight the war.
So I wanted to show you the Norton bomb sight again. Here's just a better angle of it. It was a little tight up in the Bombardier section of the aircraft there, but this is the Norton bomb sight, and that would be right here in the belly of the plane. I know there's a little blurry there, but it would be right in there in the belly of the plane, and the Bombardier would essentially look through here and hit his target here. This is just incredible. I know it may seem archaic to us today, but this is cutting edge in World War II. So one of the aspects of the war that often goes unlooked is the efforts to keep these machines flying. So Greg mentioned that it took nearly 20 to 24 people on the ground to keep this thing flying. So as soon as it would land from a mission, they would essentially strip all the guns, start working on the engines, patching up any holes from German flak or bullets from aircraft, and they'd get this thing in working order as fast as they can. And I thought that was impressive, that a crew waiting on the ground, as soon as this thing landed, working through the night to get this thing back in the air. And that's something that you don't really think about when you see these machines of war here, but I wanted to touch on that. And here's just a closer look at some of the parts of the B-17 here. And again, like we just touched on, we had crews on the ground waiting to get these things back in order. And you don't realize how intricate these are until you see them in person. It's just absolutely incredible. So here's part of the engine here. And as you can see, this is what it's supposed to look like when it's all together. Now, something that I think is extremely fascinating is the individual identities some of these crews took on. So you can see some of the uniforms that the bomber crews would wear, along with some of the art that they would put on their jackets and noses of the planes here. And I think that is just so cool and kind of reminds you of that human element. You know, these guys were just ordinary men who all had their own interests, all from different walks of life. You can see some nose art there. Here's a few more depictions of nose art and a few more bomber jackets. This is probably one of my favorite things, artifact-wise, in the museum so far. Now, we saw the bomber in depth, but it's also important to remember that the 8th Air Force wasn't just bombers. The P-51 Mustang was a vital part of this mission here. Not only did they provide security, they also helped provide support for the forces on the ground. And you can see some artifacts here. Some shells from a .50 caliber machine gun that were mounted at the wings. And this piece here is pretty interesting. Here is a piece of the tail of Lieutenant Robert Powell's P-51. And he sustained this damage while he was strafing an airfield. And a pilot's headgear and mask. P-51 is one of the more iconic fighters of World War II. So I wanted to share some of these with you. So you heard Greg mention that nearly 26,000 members of the 8th Air Force lost their lives. Well, imagine this, an additional 28,000 became prisoners of war. So again, they were conducting daytime raids over Nazi-held territory. And unfortunately, a lot of those crew members were shot down. Remember, one B-17 held 10 men. So you have a handful of aircraft shot down, you can have dozens and dozens of men either killed, wounded, or captured over enemy territory. So this section here is highlighting a brief glimpse into the life of a POW in enemy-occupied territory. So one of the things that's always interesting is when soldiers or airmen or Marines are captured, sometimes they create some pretty creative things. And what you're looking at here is a handkerchief created by Tech Sergeant Thomas McGorry. And over here in captivity, while he was in captivity, Samuel Miller, who was a tail gunner on a B-17, created this blanket with patches made from other prisoners of war. And while he was healing from his wounds, he created this blanket. And man, talk about getting personal. This man was captured, had no idea if he would ever see his friends or family again. Created this blanket, and here it is before us here. Wow. Okay, so this is extremely fascinating. So what you're seeing is the section of a wing of a B-17. And in December of 1944, Christmas Eve to be exact, Sergeant Charles W. Haskett and his crew in a B-17 were shot down over enemy territory. He parachuted out, and about 50 years later, Charles Haskett would read an article from the 487th Bomb Group Auxiliaries newsletter, which described a B-17 wing that had been found and put on display in Belgium. So he contacted the author and recognized that this section of the wing was in fact his plane, the Lindy Lou. And after communicating and working out some logistics, that wing was returned to the United States and placed here at the mighty 8th Air Force Heritage Museum. And you can see here the signature to Chuck Haskett, 8/11/2001. Wow. Just incredible to know that one of the crew members of this plane not only survived, but he was able to be reunited with a part of his aircraft. And it is right here before us on the camera.